Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins. A real pleasure today to be joined by Jenn Drummond. Jenn, you're very welcome to the show. Let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do for our worldwide audience. Over to you, Jenn.
Perfect. Thank you for having me today. My name is Jenn. I'm a mom of 7. I'm like a few months away from having a house of all teenagers right now, which is a little overwhelming. I'm a business owner of a financial service firm. I'm a world record holding mountaineer and speaker, author, all the fun things.
Okay, wow, incredible already, Jenn. Let's talk about the climbing experience, joining the climb,
Yeah.
the record. Let's start there if we can. Tell us a bit about that. Unpack that, will you?
Yes. Okay. So let's go back to like life pre-climbing. So I was checking the boxes, doing all the things that we're supposed to do. I got into a horrific car crash in 2018 that should have taken my life and thankfully didn't, which gave me a line in the sand to kind of recreate and say like, hey, if this is going to end someday, what do I want to do before it does end? So I started getting creative and building a bucket list again of things I wanted to do, see, experience, explore. And on that list was climb a mountain because I live in Park City, which hosts the largest ski resort in North America. So I'm surrounded by mountains. I'm like, I'm going to climb one. And in 2020, I was turning 40. So I was going to climb a mountain for my 40th birthday. And I was planning to climb a mountain named Ama de Blanc, which is located in Nepal. It's the Paramount Pictures logo, all that fun stuff. But COVID entered the scene, as we all can remember. And I became a homeschool teacher to all my beautiful little humans. And one of my little guys challenged me in his math homework discussion about doing hard things. And he said, if I was doing something hard, why was I climbing a mountain called I'm a Dumb Blonde instead of a real mountain like Mount Everest? I'm like, Ama de Blanc, not I'm a Dumb Blonde, but thanks, sweetheart. And that put me on the path to climb Everest, to show him we could climb our Everest no matter where we were. And then my coach upped it to setting this world record and becoming the first woman to climb the second highest peak on each of the 7 continents, something that had only been done by one male. And he convinced me because he presented it, right? Sales pitched me 1,000%. He's like, Jenn, 7 mountains, 7 continents, 7 children. It's a jackpot. Of course it's a jackpot. It's all those 7s. I'm in. I haven't slept in a tent before, but we'll figure those details out. And that's how that whole adventure unfolded and has been like the consumption of my life for the last 4 years, for sure.
It's incredible, Jenn. Thanks for sharing that. And I know, because you talk about it on your website, that it's not just about the 7. Obviously, that's an important number, but you're talking about how limitations, how you can overcome them and turn them into possibilities, don't you? And you talk about climbing for the possibility of better. So, I mean, you've really put a lot of thought and passion into this, right?
Yeah, I think we're all climbing a mountain. And some of us are metaphorical mountains. For me, it was physical mountains for a little bit, but all those lessons reflected back onto metaphorical mountains. And we climb for different reasons, right? Like I climb to shed the limiting beliefs that I subscribed to before. I climb for a better future for my children. I climb for, a lot of things. And when I reached out to other people and asked them what they climbed for, it's solving cancer issues. It's getting rid of human trafficking. And, like everybody has this climb or this passion that they're excited about, that they're putting intention and effort and pursuit into. And when we borrow that energy from each other, no matter what climb we're on, it makes our individual climb that much easier to get to the top.
I love that, Jenn. And I want to ask you then about the word breakproof.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about this? Because, I mentioned at the top being an author. I know you speak as well. I know that you're on the stage sharing insights and maybe those discoveries, those strategies for building resilience. Tell us about the word breakproof. Tell us about the book. Tell us about how all that manifested itself, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay. So I think like the universe nudges you at different times in your life. It's whether you're paying attention to the nudge or not. When I was training to climb, a friend of mine and I went out to lunch and he's like, "You need to write a book. Like this would be so helpful for people. All the things you're saying are the exact same things I'm struggling with in my business and my company and blah 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 blah." It's like use the mountain metaphor and help us out. So I started writing a book, a lot more hard, a lot more challenging than what I thought it was going to be. And I came upon the title Break Proof because I think there's so many things in our life that try to break us. But when we look at those breaks and we sit in them, they give us proof of what's working, what's not working, what do we need to do to be able to accomplish this thing that we're setting out to try. And so I named the book Break Proof because it's not about not breaking. It's about having the courage to sit in that break, learn from the experience, gather the proof of what you need to be able to make your next step forward and continue your climb.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. How did you find the process of writing, or how do you find the process of writing? Because you're pretty busy too. You mentioned, 7 children, you mentioned homeschooling, you mentioned climbing mountains. How does all this get organized? You must be pretty organized behind the scenes, Jen.
Yeah. I allowed it to look different ways. So sometimes I would be training and then I would have a voice memo running of thoughts that were coming into my head or stories that I wanted to get down on paper, or things like that. Sometimes I would sit at a desk and then I would be just like spilling and writing and writing and writing and writing and writing and letting everything kind of fall out. It's a process that doesn't, for me, I didn't have like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this for 2 hours, and here's what it looks like, and here's how it's gonna go." Because I didn't have a timeline of like, "This has to be done by this time frame," or "This is what I want to do." It was very organic and unfolding. And then what I did do is I hired somebody to help organize the thoughts. So when we first started this whole thing and like the transcriber turned all the like voice memos into paper and things like that, we were like 1,000 pages. It was endless stories. So then it was what stories are kind of the same, what can we group together, what's the central theme that we're pulling. And so having an outside eye look in and kind of help me piece that together. And then we had an editor come in and hacked it down to 200 pages. So there you go, right? But I definitely think it starts with you with these ideas and just allowing the space for those ideas to flow out and be whatever they are. A lot of them are terrible. You got to think about it. We kept 20% of the book. So 80% of what I spilled on this paper was garbage. And so 20% we kept, and then just having other people play a role so that you get different perspectives. Because when you're writing on a piece of paper, you don't know, like, am I losing this person because I'm getting into too much detail? Am I not giving them enough detail? So now they feel lost. Books have a cadence to them, kind of like a song does. So you can't bring them down to this low moment and leave them there for too long. You got to bring them back up. There's this whole musical element that I had no idea. And so we started getting into it. And because I didn't put myself like I need to be a New York Times bestseller with my first book, I actually allowed that space to have quite a bit of fun writing it.
Oh, it sounds great, and it's actually great advice for anybody who's maybe looking at that process, because you had all this content, if you like, all these sort of ideas, and then having somebody as well who can help you maybe sort through that. And you sort of mentioned 20%. My mind automatically went to sort of 20% of the real distilled great stuff, probably making 80% of the difference in somebody's life. I love that.
Yeah.
Really cool to hear. And look, I started off that question by asking you about how do you fit it all in? You must be organized, you must be busy. And I'm going to add yet another string to your bow, which is, as well as being here on the Global Discussion, you've also got your own podcast, right?
Too.
Seek Your Summit. Tell us all about the podcast. You've had some great guests on, and obviously you discuss a lot of lessons and learning there. Tell us how the podcast came to exist, and what are you doing with that podcast? You've had some great discussions on there.
Yeah. So here's the crazy thing about the podcast. The podcast came about because of the book. So my book company that was publishing the book, they said, "Hey, listen, you're going to need to get on television and promote this thing, and you need to get better and on camera and talking to people and being impromptu. You should start a podcast so you can develop those skills." So that was like the entire purpose of the podcast, was just to be a better speaker on the spot and refine my stories, because I'd be telling them so many times. Um, my podcast started in a closet that I put up foam like padding to help absorb the sound. And I remember recording my first episode where I don't think all the glue had cured from these like foam things being glued to the wall. And so when I turned the lights on to have this podcast with this lady, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I'm getting high. Like, I can't say this. It was a very important guest. But I'm like, and you like learn so much, right? I don't know how to keep track of time or where we're at or all those things. I mean, it was a disaster. But here's the thing, I loved it. I loved hearing people's stories and why they did the things they did and what was their pivot moment or the aha, or how did that show up and how did they navigate failure and that self-talk. And I mean, people are fascinating because I have twin daughters. They have pretty close to the same life. They are entirely different humans. And so for podcasting, I get to interview these people and talk about their stories of resilience, of overcoming, of how to turn success into significance, and just hear what they did. And I swear, when we talk to each other, we learn ideas from each other and we apply them to our own lives and things shift.
And I don't know how I can keep going with the things that you're doing, but the blog as well. I love how you got the blog laid out, because it's 7 reasons how to do this, 7 steps for doing that, 7 professional tips here, 7 athletes do that. And the number 7 plays a big role in the blog, at least in a lot of the articles that I've read. And are they excerpts from information that you had already? Or do they come out of the podcast discussions, or how do the blogs get sort of
Yeah.
created, Jen?
Well, so my number is 7. I try to use 7 as often as possible because it gives you a framework and structure, right? It turns anything into something. Okay, 7. I have 7 kids. I can do 7. Like I have experience with 7. And then how I come up with articles is someone will email me. Be like, hey, I have a question about this, or what do you think about that? Or I'll have a podcast discussion, or after a speech, someone will come up to me and talk to me about something. And so then when that curiosity, I'm like, if one person has the courage to ask this, probably more people are thinking this. So let me write something so it's more available for people to have the resource.
And I suppose I have to ask you, because we've touched on world record holding mountaineering. We've
Yeah.
talked about speaking and podcasting and being on stages, and we've talked about being an author and writing and the blogs and everything in between. And you must obviously meet and experience lots of different inputs from different people, lots of different wisdom. And my question is this: whether it's in your personal life, your family life, your business life, your, climbing a mountain life, there must be great advice that you've received along the way, Jen. And if I was to ask you, or we met in an elevator and said, look, what's the best advice you've ever received, Jen? Would anything automatically spring to mind that you could share with our audience?
Yeah. This is one I still work on, is being kind to myself makes me stronger. Okay. I think a lot of us that are these high achieving people are so hard on ourselves, and we're trying to do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And this person pulled me aside, like, hey, listen, if you're in a hard environment, you need to be soft, because otherwise those two hards are going to rub against each other and something's going to give. But if you look at water, water can overcome anything that's hard. It just works its way around. And so they talked about like being kind to yourself. What is your self-talk? Are you building yourself up? The world's hard enough. The climb is hard enough. Raising children is hard enough. You being hard on yourself doesn't help the situation at all. You being kind to yourself gives you a space to build from and change that energy that you bring into the world. And that's a constant on me, because if I'm running late or if I'm doing this or I overcommitted or whatever, I'm like, Jennifer, you shouldn't do this. And then when I'm like, okay, is that really nice? Would I talk to my friend like that? Or would I talk to my kid like that? No. And ever since I've been kinder to myself, I've been able to just enjoy the magic of life a bit more.
I really like that. Thank you for sharing that, Jen. That's really
Yeah.
good. Um, and I want to ask you a little bit about inspiration as well as meeting all these people and, getting advice, there's also something about passion and inspiration in life in general. And you're doing an awful lot and continue to push boundaries. And I'm wondering where, when you analyze that and you think, well, where does that come from? Is it family? Is it friends? Is it looking at other people and deciding that's the track I want to go? Is it this sort of burning flame that you had inside that you just had to do these things? Where does that innovation or that inspiration come from with you, Jen?
Yeah, I think I get it from so many things, which is why I have so much energy to do a lot. I have a really good girlfriend named Erin King, and she's developed this entire energy exam, which breaks down like what your energy pattern is, what your chargers are, what your dischargers are. And when I took that exam, I realized, okay, if I'm feeling a certain way and I want to feel a different way, what are my energizers and how do I add them into my day right now so that I can operate at the level and vibration that I want to operate at? So I've done a really good job at cultivating people, places, things that bring me joy and happiness. And when I add that into my mix, the combination makes me even happier or excited or whatever in that level.
I like that. We're almost like the humans now. We're almost like these electric vehicles that are so popular now, right? We need to recharge. And I love what you were saying earlier as well, because it's somehow related that you sometimes when you're in those tough environments, you have to be kind to yourself, right? I really liked what you were saying there. And also that sort of inspiration and your thought process around that. And also friendship, right? And people being able to help you understand the energies. That seems to be great. So thanks for sharing that. Now, I don't, I like to ask my guests the next question. I'm afraid to ask you it though, Jen. I got to be honest. Because the question I love to ask is when you think about the next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months, what's going on in your head? What are you thinking about? What are you hoping to achieve? How does planning work in your world? So I'm going to ask it to you. And what do you think about? Or are you sort of like taking each day as it comes? I kind of get the impression you got to plan a few things though.
Yeah, I don't have the flexibility to be able to take each day as it comes. I try to build that in because I have 7 children and there's things that always pop up. But I look at life in a bigger picture and then dial down to the granular. So I try to look at each year as what's my significant thing that's going to happen this year. I want the year to have a memory. So for example, 2024, I released my first book, right? 2023, I set a world record. 2022, I summited K2. 2021, I summited Everest. Like those were my epic things that was going to achieve that year. And then aside from that, I try to do 6 things. And I know this sounds silly because you have 365 days, but if you don't plan this ahead, it will not happen, that I haven't done before. So that I have entirely new experiences that I would normally not attend, right? That could be going to an orchestra concert or participating in a parade or like going bowling or try skydiving or, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It just has to be, I'm going to go throw pottery this weekend and try that. Because I think when we try new things, we learn about ourselves and we have to be good at that. And you only get good at that by doing that. So every year I start out the year and I have 6 new things that I want to try. I should have 7 though. Now that I'm hearing myself say this out loud, aren't I? And then from there, I will like allow space to show up for something new and exciting, but it probably will get pushed to the next year. 2025, I'm not quite sharing what I'm doing yet, but I have some fun stuff in the works. I just want to work through some ideas before I totally finalize it and commit, because once I say something, I'm kind of one of those people that does it. And yeah, that's how I approach it. Like I definitely approach it from that standpoint. And then quarterly, I'm looking at my calendar and saying, am I doing things exciting this quarter? Because if I don't have things exciting in my calendar, I am a grouch. I am not fun to be around. I'm not nice. Like it affects everything. So I always have to have something exciting in my calendar that gives me the momentum to get there.
It's incredible just to hear you talking, Jen, because whether it's planning the next skydive or the next, pottery class or climbing K2. I mean, it's quite wide and varied. And it is wonderful though, because ultimately I think what you're touching on is that you're experiencing life in lots of different ways. And you're setting those goals and you're having those big things to look forward to as you go through each year, which is great learning for us. And I want to ask you a question. It sounds like such a simple question, but I'd be very interested in your answer when you reflect on it, which is What do you love about what you do and the way that you have your life set up today? What do you love about it?
Oh, I love the people in my life. Like, I am surrounded by amazing people. Example, I used to nanny for a family growing up. That lady has nannied for us for 17 years now. And so, I mean, it's just awesome because when you have somebody in your life that's been a part of raising your children with you, it allows you to have freedom to go do things because they have the history, they have the knowledge, they know all the things, right? And so, for me, I am just so grateful for the amazing humans that inspire me, empower me, support me. And if it wasn't for them, there wouldn't be a me.
I love that. That's really, really nice. Thanks, Jen. Um, Look, we're going to be coming towards the end of our time together today. I mean, we could talk for weeks on end, but I want to ask you about anything that I haven't touched on, or maybe a parting thought or something you'd like to expand on that we can leave our sort of worldwide audience with. So that's the first part, something that you think we should maybe expand on, touch on, or something we haven't covered, like final thoughts from you, Jen. And secondly, I want you to maybe let people know how they can connect with you, find out about the great work that you do, the book, the speaking, the podcast, the setting world records. Where do you want to point people to?
Okay, I'll combine this into one since you
Sure.
combined it into one. Okay. So I think a big part of having success in anything that we do is taking space to get curious and become aware of how we're showing up, what we're doing, and is the story that we're writing in our head true? So for me, I can get like caught into a story and I can run it down the road and all of a sudden I'm like way off center. And so during the day, I'll put on little alarms on my phone and these alarms will go off. And when they go off, it's a chance for me to take 3 deep breaths in over a minute and then say, like, okay, am I doing things right now that bring me joy, that are bringing me closer to my goals, that are having me show up as a person I'm proud of? And just those like check-ins allow you to be more intentional in your life and everyday pursuits that you do. So another thing for people to follow along or stay in touch or get into my community is I have a picture of the Milky Way galaxy going over Everest Base Camp. And anytime I look at that picture, it kind of reminds me like, okay, we're like these little humans dancing on this planet that circles a sun, that has a moon, that moves the oceans, and look at all these stars. Like, why am I making this such a big deal? Like, breathe a little bit and life is okay. So, if you want to get that video, you have to text 33777 the word Everest. So Everest to 33777 and you'll get that video to keep on your phone. And anytime you're feeling overwhelmed or angry or in a car and you're like, someone just cut me off and I'm like mad at a red light, like check that video out and just reconnect to the magic this world is and have fun.
That's wonderful. That's really, really wonderful. Thanks so much indeed for sharing that, Jen. Is there a
Yeah.
website or anywhere we want to point people to?
Yes, please. So if you check out jenndrummond.com and Jen is 2 N's, you'll be able to see if I'm climbing a mountain right now and track on that mountain, or some of the details of previous climbs or different products and things that I love and enjoy and all that good stuff.
Well, that's wonderful, Jen. And that brings us nicely to the end of our discussion today here on the Global Discussion. I want to thank our audience who's been watching and listening along with us for this episode. I'm going to ask them to like and follow and subscribe and do everything I need you to do to help support this show. And of course, go and check out Jen's website, send that text, get that video, and find out whether Jen's on the side of a mountain or on a stage or writing another book. Who knows? But Jen, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you again today. Thanks so much for being a guest on the Global Discussion. And I'm going to ask people to join me here again for some more discussions with creatives and leaders and thinkers just like Jen. Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.